Heavy security and rising tensions in a holy city the day after a deadly attack on a synagogue by two Palestinians that killed 5 people. Right now, the international hotspot, Jerusalem. Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Franzen in New York. The 5th victim was an Arab Druze. He succumbed to wounds he suffered at the synagogue attack. The other 4 were rabbis, including 3 Americans. And we take you now live outside that synagogue. ABC News Chief Foreign Correspondent Terry Moran in Jerusalem. Terry, you went inside that synagogue today. Describe the scene.
You know, Michelle, I was here yesterday and inside the synagogue as they were just completing the cleaning up of the atrocity that happened in there. It is part of the custom and the belief among the people in this congregation that every speck of human remains must be lifted and not left behind. And that's what they were doing yesterday. Today, walking in here, there was the buzz and bustle of prayer and study and worship. It was as if the people who came here today were reclaiming that room from death back into spiritual life. It was really something quite remarkable to witness.
Reclaiming and resolve, and also still rising tensions, though. What are we learning about the attackers and any motive?
Well, there's no question that this attack marks another episode in a rising conflict around some of the holiest sites in Jerusalem here. And what people are concerned about is that these are self-radicalizing people. The 2 cousins who perpetrated this horror, they did so apparently on their own without direction or funding or orders from above. One of them actually worked on this street. And I just spoke with a man, Dr. Norm Hesching. He is a survivor. He was in there yesterday morning when the 2 assailants broke in. They started shooting. One of them came at him with a knife, took a swipe at him. He was actually injured along the side of his body. He said he looked in the man's eyes and he recognized him. He's a man who worked in one of the stores on this street. He thought the man recognized him and nevertheless sought to kill him. He pushed a couple of desks at that guy and got out of a side entrance, barely making it out, where 4 were killed. And then, as you mentioned, the 5th, the policeman, in the gun battle right here. There's still bullet holes in the windows and in the walls here. So what they're learning about the assailants is that they were in this neighborhood. These are not people from far away. These are people who were trusted, who were known, one of them, and decided, for motives at this point unknown, to perpetrate this terrorist attack.
And Terry, amazing details coming out from inside that synagogue. We've also been looking at video of you inside the synagogue. Let's turn now to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who promised to demolish the homes of 2 attackers. We saw him make good on that promise. Do we know how else the Israeli government is planning to respond?
Well, you know, Michelle, that is a tough question for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet. This country, just about everyone in this country, Muslim, Christian, Jew, was appalled by what happened in here. It is something that actually kind of united the country. But certainly for the Jews of Israel, this represents a particularly painful and outrageous attack. And there's great pressure on the Israeli government. You can hear the traffic that comes through. Some of it is a busy street. Some people are here to look at the posters, at the bullet holes, etc. But as I was saying, the Prime Minister has a challenge. He's promised this harsh response, but when you have these attackers who do it themselves without a lot of direction or funding or ordering of them to do so, what's the military target? Where would you send the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, to respond to this kind of attack? Both the attackers are dead, and nevertheless there is a demand for a tough response from Prime Minister Netanyahu. So far, you've seen escalated security patrols in the Palestinian neighborhoods. There have been some light clashes over in East Jerusalem, and he said some of the response will be defensive. They will increase their guard against people like one of the attackers who was here in this neighborhood. It will make life just that much more difficult for all the people here who endure this conflict year after year, decade after decade.
And Terry, we see that Benjamin Netanyahu has said that the Israeli government will respond, will take measures to make sure that the citizens are safe. But he also called for relative calm and also had harsh words for Hamas. What are we learning about Hamas? We know that they don't take direct responsibility for this latest attack, but we have heard some reports of some celebrations in there. Is that widespread?
That is not widespread. There were some celebrations in Gaza and a couple on the West Bank, Palestinians celebrating the killing of the people here. But the vast majority of people of goodwill from all communities simply appalled by what happened here. Hamas did praise the action, calling it one of a martyrdom operation, as they call these things. But that was rejected by Mahmoud Abbas, who's the president of the Palestinian Authority. And here where I am standing right now this morning, there was a remarkable scene. The leaders of all of the faiths of this holy land, rabbis and priests and bishops and cardinals and imams and sheikhs, all sitting here praying for peace and for calm. And you mentioned Prime Minister Netanyahu calling for restraint. They don't want to see vigilante violence perpetrated against innocent Palestinians. And I will say, having been here for hours over the past couple of days, one of the things that struck me, imagine people coming into your house of worship and slaughtering people. I have not heard anyone call for vengeance. I've heard expressions of strength, expressions of resolve, anger, criticisms of President Obama for his policies, but I haven't heard a single person call for revenge. And that is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu, that everyone, of course, would want to maintain so that this doesn't spin even farther out of control.
And spinning further out of control, we have heard of some clashes with Palestinians and Israeli security. How does the government expect to quell this, given the months of escalation?
You know, that is really a hard problem, because what is happening here, this is all part of a larger conflict that's been going on for weeks. And that is over one of the holiest sites in this holy land, holy to Muslims. It's the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It is the place where, in the Muslim belief, the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. For Jews, it is the Temple Mount. It is where the temples of Judaism were built thousands of years ago. And so it is a place of great holiness for both faiths. And there is now conflict over it, as some Jewish leaders have called for Jews to be able to pray in that space. Since 1967, when Israel took this part of recaptured Jerusalem, I suppose they would say, there's been an accommodation, kind of a status quo. Let the Muslim Authority that has run that space for many hundreds of years continue to do so. There are people calling for a change, that Jews should be allowed to pray up there. That has triggered anger on the part of many Palestinians and Arabs. And the real danger, and what we're seeing here may be part of it, is that this conflict, which has been between two peoples over land, Palestinians and Israelis over land, now becomes between Jews and Muslims over faith, over religion. And that is a great danger, because that is essentially an irreconcilable conflict. That is what this is part of. That's what all the leaders are trying to avoid. But there is this gravitational pull towards greater radicalism that really threatens even the fragile status quo here.
ABC News Chief Foreign Correspondent Terry Moran, right outside the synagogue where that violent attack, deadly attack, took place yesterday. Thank you very much for joining us.